Okay, so we're going to start the session today. Welcome to our first session for the Americas Coaching Supervision Network. We meet once a month, every third Monday of the month, like today. And today is also Martin Luther King's celebration in the US. So I think it's a good reminder about rights. And also I want to acknowledge that we have a special event going on in the United States too today. And people can resonate to that in different ways. But as supervisors, we are paying attention to I number 7 all the time, how the system is affecting us. So whatever your beliefs are, this is in the background for many of us. That is what's happening right now in the country. And how this is going to be affecting not only Americans, but the rest of the world. So we hope for the best. And today we're very lucky. We have some newcomers. So for the people who are here for first time, welcome. Welcome to our network. We want to open this for all supervisors and coaches, anybody interested in coaching supervision. And today we're very lucky to have Joel and Thomas. Both of them have been with us in this network a few times, I think. We were trying to figure out when was the last time. And Joel was also the editor of the book that we work with Lily on coaching supervision. So we have been working with him for a long time, and he has been one of the supporters of supervision for many years in his position as I know you are in charge of research at ICF for many years, and I was in the global board when they hired you. So I think that this is almost 10 years ago, isn't it, Joel? How many years
Yeah,
have
it's
you been
almost
working?
11 now.
11 years. Great. It's great to have you here. So maybe for people who do not know you, and Thomas, maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you. And I want to thank you for being here today to talk about the ICF Core Competency Framework for Coaching Supervision, what is brand new, just came up last year. So we are looking forward to learning about it. And also, I want to acknowledge one more time to people who are coming here for first time and all of the people who are joining. And we have 20 people, so it's great to see everyone. So we are going to, I'm going to get you to give you a spotlight so people can see you and Thomas a little bit better. And you can go from here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Damien. Lily, excuse me. Thank you for having us. It's really an honor to be with you all today. So I wasn't going to say a whole lot about myself. Joel DeGirolamo, Vice President of Research and Data Science at ICF, as Damien just mentioned. I've been there about 11 years, have done many different projects, mostly from the academic side of the work. And Thomas, if you want to go ahead and say a few things about yourself and get our slides going, that'd be great.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Thomas Tkach. I'm the Assistant Director of Academic Research at ICF. I've been with ICF. I left a little bit, but overall, I think I've been there about 9 years. I've worked in the research department and the credentialing department, so you may have seen me in different roles if you've contacted ICF, and worked on different various academic projects with Joel, and one of these being the supervision competencies. So really looking forward to the conversation today, and thank you for having us.
So in addition to Thomas and I, we were also joined in this project with Carrie Abner, who's head of credentials and standards, and Ali Lake, who is in the coaching education department. Ali is also a PhD and a PCC coach. And of course, with both the addition of those folks, and then of course, all the excellent SMEs, subject matter experts that helped us with this project, we feel we had a really, really good outcome. So we're very grateful for that. So as an overview of what we're going to talk about, we're going to explain briefly the research process that we used, and then the coaching supervision competencies themselves. And we also want to give a little bit of comparison with the mentor coaching competencies, because there has been a lot of confusion between the two over the years. And we feel that during this project, we spent a lot of time trying to tease out the differences and to make that distinction very crisp between the two. We're going to have a little breakout session for all of you to discuss the competencies themselves and the meaning, how meaningful they are to you in your work, with a debrief, and then a little bit of time for some questions and answers. Hopefully we'll have answers. I assume you'll have questions. So briefly, the research process. Thomas and I both have degrees in what's called industrial and organizational psychology, and the foundation of industrial and organizational, or IO, psychology is what's called job analysis. And job analyses must be systematic, so they have to be very defined and structured, so you're doing a good job of understanding what a current job is. And it needs to be comprehensive. It needs to cover all areas of a given job. And so as part of that job analysis is to identify what the tasks are. What is an incumbent, a person in that job? What do they do? What are the tasks? And then what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities, or what you may hear of occasionally as KSAs? What are the KSAs of a given job? And there might also be some personal characteristics that a high performer in a given job should have. And then there may be some other ancillary factors along with that. And all of this is to understand what it takes to effectively perform whatever specific job it is that you're studying. And so in our case, it was coaching supervision. So if we look at a little bit more of a breakdown of the components of a job analysis, there's kind of two ways to look at it. And one is traditionally, one is that you can look at the actual work that the individual, the SME, the subject matter expert is doing, or you can look at the worker and what are their characteristics and what do they have. And for our purposes, we have consistently over the years used the work, looked at the work, although we do look at the worker to some extent. But primarily, if you look at the competency models that we have, they're geared toward the work. Now, you can do your job analysis by gathering data with interviews. You can do questionnaires and surveys, and we use questionnaires and surveys a lot. And many of you have probably helped us by filling out those surveys. We're very grateful to you. Thank you, because that is extremely valuable input to us. You can also observe what a person does in their job, and we do a bit of this when we listen to coaching recordings. There's certainly a lot of them available to us as the credentialing exams. And then you can also review work documents that an incumbent may create in a job. What is done is analyzing that data as deeply as you can, and we look at our data in many different ways. You can go out and then go verify that data. You can say, this is what we've discovered, and review that with the subject matter experts again, and make sure that what you've concluded is accurate, and then summarize it. And in our case, the summary is basically the competency models themselves. Now, in terms of what we actually did for the coaching supervision competencies, we followed a multi-step process. And one of the things that you always should do in a job analysis is review the literature. What is the research? The people who've come before you looking at a given job, what have they done? So we did that. Thomas and I had published a literature review for coaching supervision many years ago, but we updated that. We updated the definition of coaching supervision so that we would have a draft moving forward. And then from there, we did 20 interviews of coaching supervisors to understand a little bit deeper what they do, and created a task and KSAO, so knowledge, skill, abilities, and other characteristics list. And then we put out a survey, which again, many of you may have completed. 341 people did complete that for us. We are very grateful for that. And then we analyzed that survey looking for what are the most important tasks, what are the most important elements of knowledge and skill that are necessary. From that, we compiled all that data and we held some workshops. We held 6 workshops with a total of 29 SMEs in all those workshops. We asked the SMEs to review the data. We had many discussions around different aspects or different topics of coaching supervision. And we talked about specific competency models, what might be in, what might not be. And one of the topics was, should mentor coaching and coaching supervision be together? For example, should some coaching supervisors, they said, we don't really draw a distinction between the two. And so that was really interesting. So then out of the workshops, we did some iterations to create a competency model. We reviewed that with another set of SMEs, some the same, some new. And then we came out with the final competency model that you will see today and that is on our website. So that was the basic structure of what we did. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Thomas.
Thanks, Joel. I'll be talking about the competency model that we developed from all that research work that we did. So one of the things we did was we updated the definition of coaching supervision. So here you see the updated definition. Coaching supervision is a dynamic and reflective process of collaboration, guidance, and support through which coaches develop their personal, professional, and ethical capacity and maturity. So you see here that it is a reflective practice, which I'm sure most of you recognize that it's a collaborative process. Guidance was another piece that we talked a lot about in the workshops about is the supervisor just having sort of a coaching relationship or is there an expert piece to it? And really it's a dynamic process, but there is a guidance component to supervision, at least in some types of supervision. There's more guidance than others. Obviously, there's a supportive function. We're looking at the functions of supervision there, and support is there as well. And then the last piece, obviously, it touches on ethics, but it's really about the capacity and the maturity on the personal level and the professional level as well. So that kind of showcases the updated definition based on the research that we conducted. I want to go over a little bit of the survey results. So these are some items that were rated very, very highly on the survey. Things about the ethics of the supervisor, making sure that they understand ethics, that they have a solid foundation in ethics and ethical thinking. Relationship building was obviously important, so building the relationship between the supervisor and the supervision client. Contracting was also a big important item, talking about the contracting not only between the supervisor and the supervisee, but also contracting within the supervisee's coaching practice. Supervisor self-awareness was also very important. So having that foundation of self-awareness and continuing self-awareness as a coaching supervisor was seen as very important. The knowledge of supervision, so having a knowledge of different models, different types of theories and foundational pieces to supervision was also seen as very important. Client development and reflection was also seen as important, so helping the client to develop professionally and personally, that capacity aspect, but also to help reflect upon their work and their world. And then resolving ethical dilemmas with the client was also a very highly rated item as well. So that just showcases the importance of that developing the client's, by client, I mean the supervisee's ethical maturity and capacity. I just want to give a brief overview of the ICF supervision competencies. So these are the high-level competencies that are in the model. So we start with the foundation. This provides ethical guidance. So this focuses on the ethics of the supervisor, but also providing that ethical guidance to the coaching supervision client, so the supervisee. And this includes like going over ethical dilemmas with them, looking at making sure that the client understands the different ethical and legal requirements of their coaching and so forth. The second one is engages in ongoing reflection and self-care. So this is mostly the supervisor who is doing an ongoing reflection of their work, self-reflection on themselves, and making sure that they're fit for purpose by doing self-care and taking care of themselves so that they can show up more for their supervisees. The next is process structure. So this is establishes and updates contracts. That's the first one in this subcategory here. And so this is about contracting with the supervisee, making sure that the contract reflects the needs of the coaching supervision client, the supervisee, and so forth. Then manages the supervision process. So this is about updating the process, making sure that the process is in alignment with the coaching supervision client's needs and also any other stakeholders that might be involved, such as the coaching client and other stakeholders as well. The third kind of section here is client learning and reflection. So this is about helping the client learn, develop that capacity to help them reflect on their work and on their environment and so forth, and helping build that capacity for reflection. So it creates a supportive environment. This is about creating that foundation of support to allow the client learning and reflection to take place. So this is about providing emotional support for the client and supporting them in other ways, like providing resources and so forth to help the client learn and reflect, and also to create that environment of safety for the client to be vulnerable and so forth. Facilitates client reflection. This is about helping the client to reflect and prodding them and probing them, or facilitating that process of client reflection so that they can reflect on their work, on the systems that they belong to, and so forth. So kind of both the client, the coach, in the coaching relationships as well, the coaching and client relationship, the broader systems and so forth that surround the client and that they are part of. Guides client development. So this is about that guidance piece that we were talking about earlier in the definition, providing guidance to the client when they need that help, giving suggestions, guiding the client to maybe help them resolve different problems in their coaching practice, or maybe ethical dilemmas that they're coming up against. And finally, there is the group supervision section, which just focuses on group supervision. So these apply only to individuals who are doing group supervision. So it's about managing the dynamics of the group and so forth, making sure everyone has a chance to participate and so forth. So I'm going to copy and paste the link to the supervision competencies. We'll take a look at those a little later, so I just want to put those in the chat so that we can discuss those a little later. But that's the full competency model will be in the chat there for you to look at. So as Joel mentioned, mentor coaching was also looked at. This is a separate project that we did. We did a whole nother job analysis on mentor coaching, and we just want to take a little bit of time to kind of talk about the similarities and differences between the two, because this question comes up a lot. You know, what's the difference between mentor coaching and supervision? So here's the updated definition. Mentor coaching is a collaborative learning process through which coaches receive feedback based on observed and recorded coaching sessions to support them in further developing their unique coaching style and coaching skills in alignment with the ICF core competencies. So if you remember earlier in the coaching supervision definition, there we were talking about capacity and kind of personal and professional development, ethical maturity, and so forth. This is more more focused on the competency aspect, like increasing the coach's competence in their coaching skills. So this is more based on the coaching skills and how well they're performing those skills in a coaching session and providing feedback. So the mentor coach provides feedback on those observed sessions to further develop their skills. So that's kind of the main difference between the two, but we'll go into a little bit more of a comparison here in this comparison table. So again, the primary focus of mentor coaching is skill development, whereas supervision is more development of the self. We talked a little bit about coaching style. So coaching style overlaps the two, but in mentor coaching, it's how it relates to the coaching skills. So how does my coaching style and my coaching skills align to best serve the client? In supervision, it's more about how does your coaching style relate to who you are as a person. Addressing ethical dilemmas. If an ethical dilemma or if a mentor coach notices an ethical dilemma in the coach's coaching, then they may refer the client to ethical resources such as supervision. So it's not actually going through the ethical dilemma with them. It's more identifying it and then sharing the resources needed to resolve that ethical dilemma. In supervision, the ethical dilemmas are actually addressed. So that's one difference there. And as far as a systemic focus, mentor coaching, it's very minimal when we talk about systemic focus. Possibly later on, they might talk about skills in terms of looking at more of a systemic focus, but these are mostly based on the ICF core competencies. So that's kind of above and beyond. In supervision, this is frequently talked about, as Damien had mentioned earlier, kind of looking at that systemic lens. Reflective practice, mentor coaching, obviously there's some kind of reflection on the skills, but it's pretty minimal. In supervision, obviously this is a core piece of what supervision is. Emotional support, there might be some emotional support in mentor coaching around, how they feel about their skills or maybe some confidence issues around their skills. But supervision is more focused on this, about helping the client, the supervisee, deal with any kind of emotional support that they need. Right now, mentor coaching is a credentialing requirement. So in order to get an ICF credential, coaching credential, you need to have mentor coaching either to get the credential or to maintain a credential. Right now, in terms of ICF credentialing, only the team coaching certification is supervision required. So to get a team coaching certification through ICF, you need to have supervision as part of that. That's the only credential that requires supervision from ICF at the moment. And then skill appraisal, as I mentioned earlier, mentor coaching, obviously that's a big piece of mentor coaching. Supervision that might come in, maybe if the client or the supervisee is having trouble progressing the coaching with their client, maybe they'll look at some skill appraisal, but it's not as common as in mentor coaching. So we want to do a little case study breakout groups with you guys. So this is kind of an interactive exercise. I sent the link of the model in the chat. So having seen the model, you can kind of look it over. You can kind of discuss it with your group. And what we want you to do is, could you give an example in your practice where a specific competency was very, very beneficial to the situation? So looking at the competency model and saying, oh yeah, I see this. This is what happened in my practice as a supervisor, and kind of discuss it within your small groups. So I think we're gonna do, let's see. Yeah, so 10 minutes in small groups. I think, Damien, you said there should be two per group if we're doing 10 minutes. So why don't we do that? Why don't we do two per group, and we'll give you 10 minutes each. But before that, does anyone have any questions before we start? Okay, great.
I am
Damien, do you
sure
want
that some people have some questions here. Don't be shy. I think came up. Do you want to ask before we go to small groups? Groups are already ready to go. So let's be sure that we don't have any questions and then we can go to groups.
Damien, could you put the questions in the chat too for our discussion?
I cannot do that, but maybe Thomas can do that.
Yeah, I will
Thank you.
do that here.
I do have a question if nobody's asking a question. Like Joel, I remember when you started this process and we had a conversation and it was one of the interviews. I was in one of the interviews and I asked you, are you familiar with the EMCC competencies framework? And you told me, I don't want to know about it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to be influenced by the EMCC framework. And then when I came out, we didn't have a chance to have this conversation, but I was a little bit surprised that there have a lot of similarities. And I was wondering, what was your reaction when you look at it after you develop yours and saw the similarities?
Well, I can give a little bit of comment, and Thomas can certainly too, because yeah, that was a topic of conversation. In fact, there were many people in the workshops who, were affiliated with EMCC and the supervision there, which is good and important. But then, we don't want to steal anything from anybody. We don't want to take away anything from anybody. So it is important to have our model be different to some extent than somebody else's model. Having said that, the constructs, the concepts, and the way people work is, there is some level of uniformity to it. So it's a whole balance, a trade-off, and that's why these are hard. One of the reasons these are hard tasks to do. Thomas, what would you want to add?
Yeah, I think that I think it would be shocking if they weren't somewhat aligned, since the MCC or EMCC competencies are based on a lot of the research that had been done so far, and this is kind of building on each other, and a lot of people use the EMCC model as well as some other popular models out there. So I think it would be surprising if they were drastically different. So I think that was it was good to see that there was some consistency there so that we weren't kind of splitting the profession in two or anything like that. So yeah, and of course what Joel said, you want to have some we tried to be as non-biased as possible, and so that was kind of not looking at it, but then we found that there are so many similarities there anyway, which I think is a good sign. So yeah.
Thank you. I saw Judy, you have a question you want to ask?
Oh, it was an observation. I was just noticing, again, similar to your question, Damien, where if we look at the EMCC competencies, they specifically call out sort of at the top level, like headline level, self-awareness, relational awareness, systemic awareness. And with the ICF version, it's sort of buried under A.2, and it's sort of then sub to that. So I'm just curious, because for me, like, one of the things that really differentiates supervision is that systems awareness, the nested systems and the complexities that come into it. So just noticing that, what was the decision around making that awareness sort of sub to something else versus how, the approach that the MCC took? Just curious about how that landed where it did.
Thomas, do you want to take that one first, or?
Yeah, it's interesting because one thing we heard from the subject matter experts in some of the workshops and in some of the comments in the survey, that not everyone, and I know this might be shocking to some of you, but not everyone takes a systemic approach to supervision. So it was kind of we wanted to make sure that those individuals who do non-systemic supervision had kind of a framework to use that was a little more universal, let's say. Obviously, we didn't want to lose some of that systemic focus to just throw it out altogether. So that's why we maybe emphasize different things in different ways to kind of make sure that the umbrella was wider for those folks who don't use that systemic approach. So, Joel, I don't know if you have any
Yeah, the
thoughts
only
on
other things I might add is that the structure is somewhat similar to the way our core competencies are. And, if you look at the structure of comparing the coaching, supervision, and the core competencies, and that was intentional because if you are already familiar with the core competencies, then it helps having that schema, right? Because we know that if we bring in new ideas into an existing schema, that people can learn them faster than introducing a whole new schema. So that was intentionally done. So I think that's, partly why, some of the major categories are similar. And then, we followed that same competency and subcompetency structure that we had before, partly because it seemed to work and resonate with coaches very well previously. So we thought, okay, well, why change a good thing? So.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Joel. Martin, you have a question.
Yes. It's following on this question of the philosophy and the structure and the systemic, non-systemic, and people not doing supervision that is not systemic. I wonder if, despite the non-biased approach, which I have not been able to join the workshops every time the dates weren't good, and Thomas was really trying to put me in, but it didn't work. So I got an idea of what was going on. And it seems that you had a very strong methodology to avoid too many bias. Still, at the end, I wonder if there is, how can I say, a tropism of who or the coaches were in majority with ICF, coming from the US, and in North America and maybe South America, and North America not having had supervision for a long time, still doing some kind of coaching, which was different from the other places in the world. So how do you analyze that? And maybe this is a link to Judy's question about how things have been structured. In short, is supervision by ICF coaches a bit different from the ones who come from places where there's a psychodynamic heritage?
You want to take that, Joel?
Sure.
So, one thing when we selected SMEs for the workshops, we really tried to have a representative sample of the ICF membership. So, a certain percentage of people are from the US, a certain percentage are from Europe, and so forth. And so we tried to represent the membership and the credentialing of ICF coaches in the workshops. But having said that, we had people from all over the world, Europe, South Africa, I believe, Asia, every South America, every region. And so we wanted to gather as much of that different diversity of philosophies and so forth when we were creating the model. And to your point, it's interesting because if you look at the different regions and the different approaches, there does seem to be regional differences. We found that back in 2017 that when we did a coaching supervision literature review, and we saw that supervision is obviously more established in, let's say, Europe, for example, and it comes from kind of the social work, counseling, therapy realm. And so, like you said, it's more psychodynamic. So There are different, definitely different regions have a different flavor of how the supervision looks. And that's kind of why we tried to have, like I said, we tried to broaden that umbrella a little bit to allow for these different types of supervision and tried not to emphasize a certain philosophy or a certain viewpoint in the model. And I think it's in the kind of the overview of the framework in the competency that I posted here. It talks a little bit about providing kind of that flexibility, the model providing that flexibility to allow for all different types of approaches in supervision and not trying to emphasize one over the other. Joel, do you have any thoughts on that?
The only other thing I might add is that we tried to take into account the training programs that the SMEs came from, because we wanted diversity from that aspect as well, because, you know, a lot of times who you learn from is going to be a big part of your shaping your work. So we tried for diversity there as well. And it was interesting, we had a couple folks who live and work in, you know, multiple regions of the world. And so that was nice to have their perspective as well, because they could bridge and they could say, well, you know, when I'm in the US, then it's kind of, I see this. And then when I'm in somewhere else, I see this. And so, you know, that was really helpful.
I see two hands. Let's hear from both of you, and then we will go to work in small groups. So Eva, and then after that, Via. So Eva, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you. So I watched your webinar when you launched the results of the research, but the competencies had not yet been released. And there was a question to both of you during that webinar, what was going to be done with the competencies. And then you said, now we are sending them to the credentialing department. And then I said, okay, next step, the competencies will be published. Next steps, it will be made a requirement. Next steps, there'll be a credential. Supposing this is an assumption, and also as an assumption that many of the people you interview are accredited by the EMCC for years, and have been, of course, been influenced by EMCC, who always demanded supervision, which ICF did not. So going back, is there any conversation of grandfathering those practitioners who have been doing this for so many years?
Well, that's a really good question. And, you know, since we don't have a credential yet, it's, to me, it's a little bit of a moot question, right? Because, you know, if you don't have the requirement, you don't have the standards set out on it yet, then the question about grandfathering people in, you know, I don't know about answering that. But yeah, you know, I know there's this question out there, you know, will it be required? Will coaching supervision beyond team coaching be required? There's also, you know, questions floating out there about, will we have a credential for coaching supervision? You know, we're all the time talking about different possibilities. And, you know, at this time, we don't have anything, but who knows what the future brings. Sorry, I can't be more definitive.
MCCs at the beginning were co-opted.
MCCs
used to be co-opted at the beginning. There was a grandfathering. The first community of MCCs were co-opted.
Yes, that's very true. And I'm very aware of that.
So we hope that you can let us know as soon as you hear anything, at least as soon as anything is going on. I want to be sure people in our network is informed, you know, what's coming up. So Svea, you have a question.
No, just an addendum. Actually, I knew you wouldn't be able to answer the question, but we are addressing through you a request. Please, let's have this conversation.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you. So noted.
Thank you.
So, obviously, and Damien said it at the beginning, Thomas and I have been working on supervision since 2017. And it's obviously, we view it as very, very important to the profession. So, that's kind of where our hearts are. There are so many parameters about moving forward, about what we think is the best thing for the profession, for ICF and so forth, and for coaches. There's a lot of pieces and parts to consider.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, for that. So last question before we go to small groups, so we still have time to do that. Svea, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, to say one of the things that I think was the most refreshing for me about the process was that it put philosophy and discipline and theory and concept slap bang into the discussion, because having participated, people became aware that they used a lot of what they think is factual language about concepts that are not shared by a global community. And it was very refreshing to notice that at long last, people were open to realizing that we speak different languages when we talk about something like coaching supervision. And best we learn to be respectful in the way that we would be of languages and the need for translation and interpretation, rather than saying, my language is right and yours is wrong. So I actually welcomed that enormously, and think that there's a lot of refreshing work to be done around the landscape of coaching supervision that could be extremely beneficial.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. So let's take 10 minutes to do this exercise. Again, Thomas, were you able to put it in the chat box for people to know what we are doing? So basically, you want to look at the competency framework and see if you have applied any of these in your practice as a supervisor or as a coach, supervisee. From that, I think that most people who are here are supervisors. So what I did, Thomas, is just to look at the competency framework and look how they have applied some of this in their work, or?
Yes, and I just posted the question there. It's mostly just a broad, open-ended kind of look at the competency model and kind of discuss how that competency model applies to maybe a case study in your practice, and just to kind of get a conversation going about how they overlap with one another.
So let's have an opportunity for people to work with each other and get to know each other. Okay, good. I just put you in a room. Okay, so people are going to be back in 4 seconds. Everybody very engaged, nobody came back, so they're all waiting to be back. Good indication. Welcome back. I know that you needed more time. And let's hear from a couple of people who would like to share.
Can I put in a bid to also respond to Gada's question that was in the chat? I really want to hear the answer to it. And I also respect that we need to share back from the groups.
Okay, so let's hear back from the group, and then we will go that, and then we'll wrap up. We have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
So who would like to share? Comments, reactions, observations, or questions you may have for Joel and Thomas.
I'd like to offer one thing. It's been quite a while since I've seen their eyes are shining in people who are relatively new. And I was with 2 people whose eyes were like shining about coaching supervision, and it was so lovely to see that.
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
jump in. I thought we were having we were looking at competency 8, the group supervision piece, and particularly that subpoint 1, and just really having a rich conversation. I'd love my, colleagues in the breakout to jump in if you'd like, but recognizing that some of that component, how we create and the flavor of group supervision can change depending on whether it's a group of just sort of random collection or people who already know each other. It can also be different if it's like individual coaches doing one-on-one coaching versus I find there's a particular flavor of team coaching supervision, that a real collegiality that can develop among the folks that participate, that I didn't see as much captured in competency 8, but I thought it was so well articulated in our group. I appreciated that.
There is a question from Gada for Thomas and Joel. I don't know if you get to see in the chat box. You get to see that in minute 136. Gadas wrote, we know EMCC supervision, the focus is in the benefit of the client through the coach, formative, normative, and restorative. Well, I'm seeing the focus on the coach self in the ICF model. Is there more to do this can speak to? Is there more to this you can speak to?
Well, I'll just speak up on it a little bit. When Thomas and I did the original literature review back in 2017, it's interesting because that concept of the 3 functions, there's actually 2 sources of that and out there, and we reference both of them. And I wonder really who came first on that. It's really fascinating. But that was very definitely in our minds as we went through the process. And the thing is, though, that those 3 functions can be exhibited, and sprinkled in many ways. And we asked ourselves, how should we put that in? And that was a really big question that we had. Thomas, what do you want to add on that?
Yeah, I would say that we did. I mean, it might not be because they're not called out specifically like they are in the EMCC model. They might be missed, but if you look through, you can kind of see that there are aspects of those 3 functions throughout the ICF competency model. For example, competency 7 talks about development. So it's about that development piece of the supervision client. Then competency 5 is about the supportive environment, so that support function is there. And then as far as the quality assurance function, I know it's called different things, but the qualitative function, you see that some in the ethics, the competency 1 about ethics and making sure that the ethics is being followed. And I believe there's also some other pieces in there about kind of reflecting on the quality of their work and so forth. So they're in there, they're just not called out specifically, I would say.
We need to wrap up because there are 2 minutes left, and Lily and I will have a few announcements to make before we finish. So we want to thank Thomas. Joel, I know, Judy, you have your hands up. Is something very brief that you want to say before we go?
Oh, I just want to notice that maybe I'm off, Gotta correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a normative, formative, restorative piece that I heard you respond to, but then there's also the client-centric versus coach-centric difference that her question calls out. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Well, somebody put it in there, I think, that we firmly believe that if you help the coach be a better coach, you're helping the coach's clients.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Thank you, Thomas, very much for joining us, for supporting supervision globally, for being here today, for all of your work. And before we go, briefly, Lily, we have some announcement. I wrote down in the chat box the dates for the global virtual conference that we organize every year. Going to be April 11 and 12. If you want to put it in your schedule, so you know registration will start in February. Lily.
And February 17th, same time, same place, same room. We will be inviting Marianne Wade to talk about using clean language in the coaching supervision space. And March the 17th, Tatiana will be with us. So hopefully you can make these great sessions. We'll see you then.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Thanks,
Joel.
everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
What I want to
everyone.
say is write in your schedule, look at the third Monday of every month so you can have it for the whole year. It's the third Monday, 8 a.m., the same room, ID, so you can have that handy. And thanks everybody again. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you all so much.